The thing that I found, at least with my experience with this one instance, we were able to alert the powers that are there that, I mean, TCQ, they've got a water alert hotline. Use it. And I told everybody, I said, I don't care if they get 1,000 calls on this. Call them. I'm like, the squeaky wheel on this one's going to get the grease. I'm like, I'm not here to sue people. I don't want to do that. That's not what I'm after. And I know other people would. That's not what I'm here for. I want to make positive change and try to make friends along the way that want to make the same change with me.
71% of our planet is covered by water. It sustains our cities, shapes our landscapes, and supports every living system we depend on. Yet most decisions that shape water are often made far from the water itself. This is the 71% podcast. Conversations with the people who live and work with water every day, and what it has taught them about responsibility, balance, and consequence.
So it sounds to me that that regulation initially that's coming now in the last few years, that was more kind of tailored for, it's a behavioural change amongst the community, right? So it's
Correct.
What everyone's doing on the ground to be more responsible, actually, think about this, which sounds like, if you said it's made a big difference already, then fantastic. How much of a different animal is it when we're talking about operators or, city managers, things like this? How do you hold those kind of businesses to account? And I guess there's only so much kind of regulation that will get to those guys. So talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges you've had in and amongst the bigger players within this, let's say.
I was kind of hoping you had all the answers to this one. No, I mean, that's the hard part is now we're dealing with governments, municipalities, operators, much, much bigger entities that in many cases, I would say enforcement is minimal or let's say somewhat of a facade. It's not all that impactful in terms of what it does. I think for me, when you look at water quality, so just to kind of, how you mentioned, how do you tell when a water has been pressured or when it needs change? Sometimes it's you see, bad things happening with usership or, over exploitation of the resource. Sure, you can find that. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in the fish. It can also be in the riparian arena as well. Because development obviously puts a huge tax on the riparian zone as well. But then if it's the water itself and you show up and it's clear one day and stinky and cloudy the next, you're like, oh, well, one of these things is not like the other and I prefer the other one. And so you have to look at where do you go from there? So we have multiple entities in Texas that have kind of their fingers in the pie, if you will. But I mean, one of them is Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And that's the one that they put forth the limits and the regulations that all the wastewater plants have to abide by. And that's all supposedly established by the EPA, which I still think is fairly laughable, the limits that we come up with, but that's a story for another time.
What is the EPA? Sorry.
The Environmental Protection Agency. So that's a federal level deal. So that's a national deal, federal level deal that then comes down to state implementation. State implementation goes into, individual usership through like municipalities or even some subdivisions that have their own little package plants that they're able to, do small wastewater releases into other tributaries. Again, how much monitoring comes into play, how honest those people are being kept, how honest those people are being in general is, something that we often wonder. Does the job that they are doing and getting water in the plant and out of the plant, is that more important than the receiving water body? Long been my question. And I think in the case of Round Rock, that has changed for the better. I think Round Rock has an opportunity. I was just even since we last spoke, um, I was in a watershed protection plan meeting for the city of Round Rock and in the entirety of Brushy Creek. And it was awesome. We had county commissioners there. We had city officials there. We had concerned citizens and stakeholders and landowners, everything, business owners that are in a room all wanting the same thing: clear, clean, healthy water through our community. And that's what it's gonna take to make those positive changes is people that all want the same thing for the same reasons. And and it doesn't matter what background you're from. We just have to take, actionable steps to get there. But in terms of how do we hold municipalities and things like that accountable, a perfect example, show up, water looks bad, smells bad, something's wrong. You call TCEQ. They are the Surface Water Quality Monitoring Team. SWCM is the there's all kinds of, of little shorthand, I forget what they're called, but anyway, just all the shorthand little initials and everything that you gotta remember. It's like, "Oh my gosh." It's like, "How do I remember all this stuff?" But SWCM, they're awesome. They do great work. They come out they're there as soon as you call. I mean, I'm the response time is legendary. So Swickham gets there. We call Texas Parks Parks and Wildlife Kills and Spills Unit. They come out and it literally they come out, they do the testing, they go monitor it, and then they're typically the ones that contact the plant and say, "Hey, you got a problem." And the hard part is the enforcement side is normally that. It's about a slap on the wrist because and I see the reasoning to some degree, and that is if they were to put a monetary fine on it, they would rather that plant or municipality spend that money doing recovery or restoration efforts. Now, does that all happen? But, that's what they would rather. Instead of putting extra burden on the municipality that they're punishing, they would rather them take that same amount of money and go, leverage it for cleanup or restoration. Does that always happen? Well, you can be the judge of that. But in the sense of how did we hold them accountable, we had to find out first what was going wrong. And so we were doing our own private water monitoring through the fly shop for some of that period. We also had TCEQ doing their water monitoring. The plant in Round Rock had their own metrics that they were doing for discharge. We had another group that I will leave anonymous. That's a very, very large group come and do independent testing so that we had another set of numbers that was like, and this is a huge entity, and I'm going to leave them out of this, but like it's a very, very large entity that they did their own private testing that their tools are as good as anybody's in the world. I trust those numbers. And so when if a municipality is waving it going, "We have these numbers," and I'm like, "Ha, ha, 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 we got these numbers, and ours don't look very good, and yours sound a lot better than ours, but ours were taken same date, same time, same place. We have a discrepancy here." So, the main thing is cover your bases, and that is I don't want to call anybody a liar. That's not what I'm here to do. But I am here to make people want to steward better. And that's the part of you're not gonna make any friends by going, "Well, you're a dirty, rotten liar, and I don't like what you're doing." That doesn't get you any friends. It also doesn't give you any partnership. And the fact of the matter is even if you win your case, if you're not in partnership with the person that's over there, switching stuff at the plant, then you're just kinda like a grumpy homeowner or, business owner that they don't wanna deal with. And yeah, you gotta get your point across, and you do need to be heard, but you also need to have people in your court to make positive change. And I find that lawsuits don't typically do that. Um, and there's a time and a place for that. I think within like if somebody's just going to abjectly ignore, then maybe there is a time and a place to do that. I just didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to be the one that we could lock arms and actually rally and, and maybe even changed whole mindsets around treatment and the receiving water body. So, and I don't have the 100% metrics on this, but basically we were releasing. I think it was like I wanna say it was like 1,800 pounds of solid matter into the creek a day or something like that. Legally, you can do that. And I was like, "That's a lot of solids."
Yeah.
Now, under normal treatment, that's not gonna happen, but that's saying that you can go up to this point and still not be out of compliance. The thing that I don't really blame the municipalities as much as I blame the EPA, honestly, because TCEQ is, using these limits, and I'm like, whether it be TCEQ, whether it be the EPA, the limits are awful. Like, I mean, if we wanted the water that we say we want, those limits are going to have to be more stringent for, phosphorus output and TSS and all this stuff. I mean, even salinity comes into play. Um, so there's a lot of things that, really come into play here that are forgotten And I think that for us, how do we make positive change is we look at the creek and go, it can't take any more of that. But the positive side of wastewater release is if it's done well, it's reliable perennial water flow. And Texas is a drought prone state, and it's growing at an alarming rate from a population density standpoint. Wastewater release is the guarantee. The uncertain is the quality at which we do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I know the answer to this already, but do you think we fully understand as a human race how much we rely on these systems? Because just when you're talking about the EPA, which is very much top down, then you've got the municipalities, which is more bottom up. There's obviously a real disconnect, and these are the guys that that you're relying on to make the correct decisions to protect these systems. So, it, is it an education issue? Is it a cultural issue? Is it just a management issue? I mean, it's a very loaded question, but
I
you
mean, the
know,
answer to that is yes, it is
yeah,
all of those. But I mean, you're right. It's a loaded question. The thing that I found, at least with my experience with this one instance, we were able to alert the powers that are there that, I mean, TCQ, they've got a water alert hotline. Use it. And I told everybody, I said, I don't care if they get 1,000 calls on this. Call them. I'm like, the squeaky wheel on this one's going to get the grease. I'm like, I'm not here to sue people. I don't want to do that. That's not what I'm after. And I know other people would. That's not what I'm here for. I want to make positive change and try to make friends along the way that want to make the same change with me. Crossing swords with a lawsuit. I mean, not to say that that's never the answer, but that's not going to be the way you make friends. I mean, if there's a way to avoid that, I want to try that first. I think that's kind of the last resort. But I think in this litigious society we live in, that's kind of so many people's knee jerk is, well, the coffee that I spilled on my lap was hot. I'm like, well, no, no, duh. But that's kind of the whole deal of now. Like, well, you're making dirty water. We're going to sue the city. It's like, well, really, for one, is that gonna hold up? You're gonna spend a lot of time in court and court cases and costs and all that, and neither of y'all are gonna walk out happy, and so you sued them for what? Damages?
yeah,
And damages to the environment, okay, great. They're the ones that are gonna wind up having to fix it anyway. So I'm like, that's kind of the part where it was a little bit different. So for me, you use the channels that are there. TCEQ was there. We had river authorities that were there. We had DNRs, Department of Natural Resources. In our case, it's Texas Parks and Wildlife. So we used all of those radio channels to sound the alarm, but then we went public with it. And that was the part that made the largest difference is getting the community involved. So our model through Living Waters is educate. So first thing is education, then you build community. That community can then be involved in conservation. So those three pillars are exactly it. And you mentioned like what is the problem? Is it an education issue, a cultural issue? Is it what is it? People will not care for something they know nothing about. It is just cold, hard fact of life. So when I was in a city council meeting, in fact, the city council meeting was such a big meeting, they had myself, Parks and Wildlife, the wastewater treatment folks, and a few others in for a closed meeting that was kind of a briefing beforehand to kind of get city council's head around what was going on. And I I grew up here. I love my city and I love where they're headed. So don't like in terms of water treatment, I feel like they're actually trying to get ahead of it. And that's been a major change since even 5 years ago. So with that, I'm going to give them mad props. But 5 years ago when I was having these meetings, I wanted to go beat my head into a wall. And I literally had somebody on the city council ask when I said how we were having fish kills. We were about to have a dissolved oxygen crash due to the amount of organic matter that they have thrown in the creek and da 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 da. I got asked the question, well, is there any way we can remove all the fish from that section of creek and maybe move them to a place they wouldn't be in harm's way? And I realized at that point, I was like, you have no idea how
yeah,
many fish are in that creek. For one, the ability of we can't get them all out. And the other part about that is like, that's not even feasible. That's not even a good answer. that I want to leave this as an open sewer while we get our act together, but can we kind of take everything out of harm's way? I'm like, that does not take into account all the benthic life and the aquatics that, all your bug life and your invertebrates and your turtles and your frogs and everything else that comes into that. Not to mention the bird life that, migratory like ducks and stuff like that that depend on that system. I'm like, you're looking at one thing. You didn't look at the system. You looked at like, oh, this guy likes fish. And and that's hard, they don't know. And so, a lot of people can sit there and go, "Oh my gosh, that's so idiotic." I'm like, I kinda felt bad. I was like, "They don't know." And who's gonna teach them? And that's the first time they had ever heard that we had a state fish. That's the first time they heard that the state fish we had in our creek are genetically pure. The city council knows that now. They didn't then. And so, instead of again, it's kind of like we talked about with even the fish handling and stewardship and how do you get people to care about fish? You can point fingers and accuse or you can educate. And so this is the same thing in a different package. You can point fingers and accuse and say it's your fault, or you can go, okay, look, here's where we are, and we want to be here. How do we get there? How do we all work together to get there? And that is sadly, a very seldom taken approach because, again, I think everybody wants to shout and make it political. And conservation is not a political issue, it is a human issue. This is
Yeah.
something that, like, this is all of our problem. We live here, we draw breath from the same air,
Well,
and
I mean,
we're drinking the same water. This is our problem, and we've all got to do it, and so I need to make those people care or show them why they should care, then we're gonna get somewhere. And
yeah.
that's what we did with the municipality, and honestly, they rose to the occasion, and they're doing, in my opinion, some pretty amazing things, and when we had, the Awasta group come down to Round Rock, they toured the wastewater plant. They got to meet with city officials. They got to see what was going on. They met folks from Texas Parks and Wildlife, and we wanted them to see, here's the problems we face, let's get the juices flowing. Let's see if there's some solutions we haven't thought of. Just because it's better doesn't mean it's as good as it could be. And so we're always on that journey of how do we make it better? How do we ironclad this for the days to come? If we're not having those thoughts, complacency will get you killed.
Because I was, it sounds like it's the disconnect between policy and reality, right? So there's like you say, when you spoke about moving the fish, I mean, actually, when you step back and think about that as an option, you should never get to that point to even suggest that, right? Like, and we're only talking about the fish here, like you said, the wider ecosystem gets affected by that, but I guess almost to get to that desperation point of to say, well, let's get these fish out of here because they're going to die. But actually, the fact that's a natural ecosystem, it's a natural resource that's been there for hundreds, thousands, whatever years it's been. It's a scary thing, and I guess what I mean, it sounds this is one municipality, right? So and you're actively making change, which is great. But from not just in the US, but what worries you if nothing changes? And I'm talking on a wider level here because you've made change locally within within Texas and the municipality there, but it's not going to be a story that ends with you. So there has to be a kind of a global change of attitude. And yeah, I mean, what worries you? Where do you think we're going if on this kind of path we're already on?
I think at this point, every creek, river, water body needs a champion. And I think that for whatever reason, for that time and space, and even currently, I'm not going to say I'm the champion, but I'm one of the champions for Brushy Creek. And I think that if you don't have people that can rise up and fight, and even fight responsibly, not just, I see so many people that just want to they just want to cuss somebody out and tell them they're doing it wrong. And I'm just like, man, can we also care about the individuals in the process? And I think that's, and we look at that on a global political scale. I mean, it's not unique just to this country. It's just, everybody's just going to be, you know, I'm just going to be opposite of you because I just want to, oppose you. And that's not it. It's like we need to find the common ground. And I think everybody wants to live in a clean earth. and have clean water and clean, clean environments. I do think that everybody wants that. Whether they know they want that or not is another thing. Because you could be a developer and be, clear cutting fields and going, yeah, I just want to make the money and support my family and do whatever else and have a great retirement. But then if you look out your window and it's all rooftops, you're going to have some regret at your end of your life. And that's the part that for me, I mean, and maybe they don't, I don't know. But for me, I look at where do we wind up if nothing changes? I think we're in a really, really bad way because I think what's going to wind up happening. I mean, if you take Texas, and this is something that we're a drought prone state. The highway the shop is located along kind of almost separates the state in two spots. You've got kind of the arid side that's on the western side, more desert like, a little bit more arid, has a little bit more elevation. You go east, it gets progressively wetter through Blackland Prairie and then in the piney woods to East Texas. Very, very different environments. And then all the way to the coastal plain. But the thing is, if nothing changes, you're looking at all your urban development is along the highway. They're drawing water from west of the highway, which is in reservoirs. Those reservoirs are very, very low most of the time. And I saw a metric the other day that showed our current storage capacity in Texas. And then it showed our current water usage in Texas, and it's just steadily climbing. And then it says our current population growth steadily climbing. Those two mirror each other. Then it said our current water storage availability, and it shows year over year our average dropping because we're not able to store it. And so I think we're 30 to 50 years out to where we actually hit that point of where we're going to have just as many people as we have water. And then you can't make any more. I mean, and barring any sort of major climate change of very rainy seasons and a lot of water caught, I mean, sure, you can get that ace in the hole where a hurricane comes and parks over it and fills everything up and everybody's breathing a sigh of relief, but that may be the exception rather than the rule. Wastewater, in my mind, I think our future is water reuse and efficient use of wastewater in the terms of how it is released. The technology is there to literally let effluent water out of a plant that is clean enough to drink. The technology is there. It already exists on this earth. It exists out of this earth. They've been using it in the space station forever. So you look at it, it's there. It's expensive. It takes a lot of infrastructure. And cities, in many cases, don't want to put that kind of money into why would you want to basically do this level when the permit only says you have to do this? If the permit says you have to do this, then you have to live up to that permit or you're going to have fines and, organizations jumping down your throat all the time trying to make you get it right. But right now, the baseline's so cruddy that why would anybody aspire to do more? And so I think a lot of it's going to come down to the fact of until it is mandated that we do better, nobody really will.
And you mentioned there about the technologies there. Just talking about technology, I mean, AI has, you know, boomed in the last 3 or 4 years. With that comes data centers, and with that comes more water because those data centers need to be cooled. And I know that Texas is, you know, becoming a place where tech giants want to take their data centers and, do that, which is great for the economy and things like that, which no one's going to, worry about. But again, what we've talked about is another water resource that's going to be probably one of the heaviest uses out there.
Yeah. And I mean, I cannot tell you in the last 3 years how many data centers have popped up around me. I have no idea. I mean, it's just, it is a major concern, and we're seeing a lot of public outcry along a lot of the waterways, especially in urban areas. And I think that's one of the things is, I mean, let's be honest, population grows around water. Think about it. Even, from a standpoint of back when this was nothing but rangeland and you had people coming out here in covered wagons, they didn't stop till they found water. I mean, otherwise you die. And so it's no surprise that, population grows around some sort of river. So as a result, those rivers get dammed, they make reservoirs, and it's just the perpetual cycle of growth. We're not making that many more reservoirs, nor do we have a whole lot of inflowing water that could fill them anyway. And that's something that's very disconcerting because we do have a groundwater element as well. I mean, we have some really large aquifers in Texas, but I mean, because we have this limestone, kind of bedrock down here that has these huge aquifers underneath it. The aquifer, when they pump it down in San Antonio, which is 2 hours from me, a creek that is literally about 30 seconds that way by car. There's a little creek over here called Lake Creek, and it's a tributary of Brushy Creek. That creek drops a half a cubic feet, a half a cubic foot a second every time San Antonio pumps the aquifer. So literally, the artesian pressure that feeds that creek from groundwater drops that much just from them turning that spigot on. And I'm like, wow, that's 2 hours away, and we can feel impacts of that. And you think that data centers and more wells and more municipality usage is not going to play a role in our perennial stream flow moving forward? You have another thing coming.
So, what does good stewardship for you look like in practice? Because for me, having these conversations, it all reverts back to stewardship and obviously the work that you've done. But this needs to be on a bigger scale. So, what does that look like, or what would you like that to be in practice if we're going to challenge this?
Great question. And I think it does go back to that global scale of what would it look like if we don't do something about it? What does it look like if we do something about it? So if we don't do something about it, I mean, in Texas, we're going to dry up. And the only thing that's actually going to be flowing is going to be the water that we're either reusing or discharging into waterways through sewage effluent. That's where we're going to wind up in a couple hundred years if things don't change. And I think there's some caveats to all of that. But as far as what could happen if positive change were made on a statewide scale first and then globally would be amazing, is I think, I mean, let's be honest. You want to take a shower, you want to brush your teeth, you want to cook in the kitchen, you want to wash dishes, you want to do your laundry. It basic human wants. I mean, I'm not going to say they're all needs, but they're wants. And part of just growing up in an urban area, you know, creature comforts. You want that stuff. That's not going to change. Everybody's going to take a shower. And so as a result, that water's got to be treated. And if it's being treated, I think the way in which we do that. So for one, the efficiency of water usage is another huge thing of like, do you really need to go water your, St. Augustine grass here in Texas in the middle of the summer? Was St. Augustine a good idea to start with? The answer is no. But we have yard usage. I mean, just people want to keep their yards green because the HOA will fine them if it's not or whatever. You have to look at all these things that are just kind of, is that necessary? Is it not? We're going to have to weigh like, what is truly necessary for, life and then enjoyment and those creature comforts. Where do we draw the line? The other thing is how we treat the water we're putting back into the system. So if you think about it, theoretically, if you have an up channel reservoir and a down channel reservoir, so one that's above the city, one below the city, let's just take that as a theoretical. If we're pumping water out of this one to use, it gets used, gets thrown into the system, and we're discharging it at a very good rate, but it's very good quality and the water's clean and pure and healthy, the river system between the two is going to be doing pretty good, and it gets caught again down there. Well, your municipalities can either form around that or something like that, just in theory. I mean, this is something that, like, there's obviously you know, a lot more detail that goes into this. But the idea is the water we put back into the system is every bit as important as the water we're pulling out of the system. Just from the health of long term, I would say just long term health in general of any waterway, whether it be static or flowing. And so for me, when I look at this, water reuse is going to be a very, very big topic in the future, especially in arid states like Texas and places like that. I think you're going to have to look at that of the water we capture in the plant instead of just going right back into the creek. Maybe it does go out to, back out to homes or something like that because it's been treated under, a much more, um, you know, I would say strenuous treatment plan where you have to go a lot more scrutiny of how this thing's produced and the end product is got to be drinkable, that's a different level of treatment. So, you have to look at moving forward. I think reuse, better management of what is taken into the plant, and especially what is discharged at the plant has to be a much better quality. And that's just one element because I mean, you're looking like you mentioned with data centers, the amount of water that uses up is unbelievable. Do we, we're gonna have to ask ourselves, do we need AI that bad? You know? I mean, How was it before we sucked, several lakes dry,
Yeah.
just because we wanted to be able to go on Chat GPT and get something to write a paper for us, you know? Yeah, I mean, I know it does so much more than that, but I look at the fact of we were existing prior to this, but is it worth the environmental tax?
So, what would you teach the next generation differently to now? And I guess, looking back from where we started here, I mean, you were taught by a different generation through your grandfather and your father about water and all of that. What would you want to teach the next generation now?
Best thing I can do for them is what was done for me. And that it's interesting. You mentioned the generational changes, my grandfather, my father to me, and now I have kids. None of us grew up in the same world, but mine is significantly similar to my dad's than my kids to me. Just from the standpoint of, you look at the advent of smartphones and things like that, and, AI and all the changes technologically, it is vastly different. And when I when I look at what made me care about water was being on it. And that's the thing that and I mean, as a small business owner, I look at this too. Fly fishing is very much a tactile, touch, feel, do type experience. It's not, I mean, you can obviously buy product online, but you can't learn it without doing it. You can't become a master without actually putting a rod in your hand, going out and practicing. And sure, you can get some tips online, but until you actually take a casting lesson from a professional, will you really understand what you're doing wrong? And so those are things that I look at. There's still a human component to this sport. And that's one of the things I like about it because that's what builds community. I learned about water by being on it. My granddad had his own opinions of it. My dad had his opinions of it. Then when I was old enough to fish on my own, I went and I was out there every waking minute that I could be there. And I mean, get the homework done, go fish. That was the goal. That was all of life at that time. The best thing I can do for my kids is show them what a healthy waterway looks like, what native fish look like, the enjoyment that we all get, and the fact of everywhere we recreate and go on vacations, it's around water. Why? Because I'm their dad. And it's just part of it. It matters to me. And so as a result, it intrinsically matters to them because that's who we are as a family. And there's an identity in that. It's not just this is what we do, this is who we are. And that's a very, very different approach because I think I don't want I don't want somebody's action out of duty. I want somebody's motive and the purity of it. And I'll define that a little bit. I don't want my kids just to go up and pick up trash because it's a trash cleanup. I want my kids to go to the water while we're fishing and go, "Oh, man," and pick that up because they just believe it's right and that's what we do. That's who we are. It's their motive. The motive is they wanna leave it better than they found it, not because, "Oh, we're doing this thing because it's this day." It's another level up, if you will, of just knowing that it's intrinsically theirs. And so for us, I think, for all of us, the next generation of, conservators and anglers, whatever you want to look at, you know, that next generation could be 90 years old, they could be 9 years old because we're educating people and it might be their first time to hear some of this. But you can make positive change wherever you're at, no matter your age, and use your sphere of influence. And honestly, it's kind of simple, but don't be a jerk. I mean, like, it's not that hard to be nice. It's really not. And you can make really great friends and really great partnerships and find out that, at the end of the day, if y'all actually, shake hands and maybe go have a coffee, that you might just want the same things. And I think that's what's really key is that for us moving forward, how will I instill this in my children and the next generation of conservationists and river keepers is to keep them on the water. Let them see it. Let them monitor the change even in their life. Let them see, I used to catch a lot of these and I really don't anymore. Why? Have them scratch their heads. And hopefully, when they see some of the things that my generation didn't see, good and bad, that they know how to make positive change when needed and learn how to celebrate the victories when needed as well. because I think we're very quick to spotlight the failures. We're very slow to celebrate the victories. And I think that's a very big thing that falls on us as, river keepers and as, conservationists. We love pointing fingers saying something's wrong. But I mean, and bad news sells. But man, when something goes right, we should be 10 times more ecstatic about that because that sets an example of what is possible for every river, every waterway, every lake and reservoir, every ocean when it's done right. And say, if you've got a community of people that care, they can make positive change and you can be a part of a community just like that where you are.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've got no, I can't agree with you anymore, and I'm not just saying that, of course. But penultimate question: we started this conversation about when you were a child and that feeling when you're on the water, and you said even when you were playing basketball or in school, you were always thinking about that next time to get on the water. So when you go to the water today, do you fit? Is it different to when you were a child, or do you still have that same feeling, regardless of everything that we've spoken about with pollution and wastewater and things like that? When you're actually on there, is it any different?
I mean, it's kind of this, oh man, I'm going to try not to get too poetic. Let's try not to do that. I don't
No,
want to
please
get,
go on, please.
yeah, I was about to say, but see, but here's the deal. You have this awesome accent. And if I was going to go poetic, I'd have you recite it anyway because it sound more meaningful. So the Texas drawl doesn't make it sound any good at all. But the thing that I look at within my feelings to water, I think what attracted me to it is isn't it funny? I was just talking to one of my guides, Marcus Rodriguez. He's guided the hill country for almost 30 years now. And I mean, dear friend of mine, and he guides here at the fly shop. I was talking to him. I said, "Isn't it interesting that people want to go to sleep? What do? You're playing sounds of water. It's river sounds, ocean sounds, rain sounds. You know, I know as humanity, we're meant to love it. I mean, shoot, we're made mostly out of it. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you look at the name of the podcast. I mean, it's like we're talking about it. You know, the earth is made out of it. We're made out of it. We're made to want it. And so I think there is this intrinsic, innate desire for us to congregate, migrate, exist, and persist around it. And so I think we overlook that a lot as a civilization. I mean, I think we get caught up in our busyness and forget that, why is it everybody goes to a river? And if you get, I mean, think about it. If you go to a really peaceful scene on a river, there's water flowing over the rocks, you hear the noises, hear the sounds, hear the birds, smell the trees, and you sit down and what's your first thing you do? You go, ah. I mean, everyone listening to this can picture that in their mind right now. That is not something that they have to think about. I don't know anybody that goes, in the middle of traffic has that same response. It's like, it's so funny. Everybody's like, find your happy place. Nobody is in the middle of a highway jam packed with idiots that are trying to cut each other off. That's not your happy place. So for me, I think the innocence of learning it as a child was still the fact of I was doing it because my family did it and because they liked fishing and they wanted to show me how to fish. And it's just what we did. Now I've spent so much time, and not just in Texas, but in so many places that now so many different water bodies in different environments feel like home and they feel familiar and they all have different attributes, whether it be in the mountains of Colorado or on the Texas coast in the surf or in the flats or wherever else about that back there, whether it be, right here on the I-35 corridor or whether it be out in the Western Hill Country in streams that literally time looks like it's forgotten. I mean, it's just like where it's just the way it's always been. You know, I find that the familiar is some things I mean, I feel like as humanity, and I heard this articulated by somebody else the other day, that we've lost our sense of place where we don't have, we move around so much and we might have, four houses that we grew up in versus one house that we grew up in or the family estate or whatever. We've lost our sense of place. And for me, places like Brushy Creek, they are my place. And those creeks I fish in the mountains, they are yet another place that they feel like home to me. You know, there's so many things that center you in that moment that for me, I think the feelings that I have now as an adult and as an industry professional, where I've been in the fly fishing industry now, gosh, what, 22 years. And then I've fished significantly longer than that. Having done it that long, I'm finding out I'm beginning to notice more. I, I'm 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 appreciating it for the things that I didn't even know existed when I was 4 and 5. It might be the bugs, it might be the birds, it might be the native plants, it might be, you know, closing my eyes and just listening to it. It might be I mean, I literally know how certain rivers smell in certain seasons just based on, the flora and fauna and everything else going on around you. Even like some of the water changes and just the way that all that takes place, I can smell. I'm like, it's spring. And I'm like, how do you know? I'm like, the river smells different. I'm like, what? I was like, but that's when you spend enough time on them, you know that. And so that's the part that, I get emotional about it now because I'll sit down and like I said, back to your question, what does a great day on the water look like? That it's I'm there and being there is prize enough. But then I got to appreciate the things that I didn't appreciate then. And you can liken it to a marriage, a healthy one that is. Um, Where if you look at, sure, you have your getting to know each other and, you go on dates, you get engaged, you get married, and there's this epic honeymoon, and you're like, oh, I could never love you more. And, you see a lot of people pine for the honeymoon later in the marriage, only to find out that your love is so much deeper and has gone through so much more and it's weathered storms and victories and memories and all this stuff that there's such a deep meaning to it that yeah, it might not be that, little high school, sweetheart kind of love, but it's so much more deep and meaningful and long lasting. And there is that element of you get butterflies every now and then. I mean, you know, for some people, catching that first fish, that's the elation of their life. I've caught my first of something thousands of times at this point, and then I've done certain things hundreds and hundreds of times. I don't want to belittle those that are just starting that journey. And for me, maybe I just want to sit there and watch a fish eat a couple of bugs, and I don't even have a rod in my hand. Maybe that's my great day on the water. To them, they have to catch that fish to feel like they interacted with it. I'm not gonna belittle that person. That's where they're at in their journey. And they may never arrive at some of the similar places. We're all different people, and that's okay. And I think it means different things for different people. But I mean, for me, being a part of it, being present, and being inspired upon exit. When I leave it, does it leave with me? That I think if I can recall it in a daydream and feel like I'm there, I probably did it right.
Yeah. And if one person listens to this conversation and then takes away from it to go, oh, I'm actually going to go and do, I'm going to go down to my local river, or I'm going to go down to the seaside, or I'm going to go and do this. I think we've made some change with that. So yeah, I think that's what's important there. Before we finish, I'd like to ask you something we're going to do at the end of every episode. So it'd be a rolling thing onto all of our different guests. If you could ask our next guest one question, whether that be just about water, stewardship, responsibility, whatever it might be, what would your question be to them?
And I love it because I have no idea who your next guest is going to be. And so, therefore, this is to anyone who's out there. It would probably be two-part, and we've even covered some of it today, and that is wherever you're at, what is the biggest threat, in their opinion, that their local waterways face, and what are they going to do about it? How are they going to enact positive change moving forward? Sustainable positive change. That's a loaded
Chris,
question.
yeah, well, that's what I was looking for. So that's great. Look, Chris, yeah, you've been a fantastic guest. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to continue to hear about your journey and the change you want to make. And I'm sure we'll speak again to have a new update for the listeners. But yeah, super insightful, and yeah, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite. And seriously, I mean, everything y'all are doing is just absolutely amazing. And it was such a great treat to have some of the group out here and explore potential possibilities of how we can collaborate with your group and see how we can make positive change here on the home front. So I know y'all are making big differences all across this globe and cannot say thank you enough for what y'all are doing.
Chris Johnson, thank you so much for being on 71%.
Thank you.